And Trump's lawyers want a judge to throw out the final report and evidence from a grand jury investigation in Georgia that looked into attempts by Trump and his allies to overturn the 2020 election, as you may remember. Now, they also want the district attorney's office disqualified from overseeing the investigation. This is Trump's first attempt to intervene in the long-running investigation, and it shows the aggressive approach his lawyers are likely to take. Now, no one has been charged yet, but the district attorney's office is considering bringing racketeering and conspiracy charges. Trump's lawyers are objecting to many aspects of this investigation, including interviews by the grand jury foreperson and media interviews by the district attorney.
And here to join us to discuss more about what the future of Donald Trump could look like if arrested and brought to justice, we welcome attorney Gerald Griggs, president of the Georgia State NAACP. Thanks so much for being here on FOXSOUL's Black Report.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Indeed, we thank you for your time. So let's start with the man of the hour, if you will, Donald Trump, who has two cases with possible indictments in Georgia and, of course, in New York as well. Talk a little bit about these two cases, maybe the differences, the similarities, and what do you think the outcome may be?
Well, both of the cases are different. One is about hush money payments to an alleged escort porn star, Stormy Daniels. Mm-hmm. And the other one is about potential election interference in Georgia with a phone call into Georgia asking the Secretary of State to find votes. So they are distinctly different, and they're in different postures. Here in Atlanta, the Fulton County District Attorney has convened a special grand jury to look into the phone call and look into possible racketeering charges. And up in Manhattan, the district attorney is investigating these payments to Stormy Daniels through the previous attorney for the President of the United States. So they're definitely different. And I think the outcome will be an indictment in both cases. I do believe that the Fulton County District Attorney has a stronger case. Of course, you have at least now 3 phone calls. We initially knew about 2 phone calls, but now 3 phone calls to different political figures in Georgia to try to change the outcome of the election. With regard to the Stormy Daniels case, it may be a little bit different, difficult to prove that case, but I think that the district attorney in Fulton County will be able to get an indictment and then ultimately be able to get a conviction because we've all heard the phone call.
Yeah.
Mr. Griggs, why do you think Trump jumped the gun about a possible indictment happening today? What incentive did he have to get out early with his narrative?
I think what Mr. Trump is trying to do is control the narrative, and he's used to being in media settings where he can set the tone. In a court of law, it does not matter what he thinks. It's about what the prosecution can prove against him. And I think his own words will be used against him to prove the case in Fulton County. But I think Mr. Trump, against the advice of his attorneys, because I'm sure the attorneys told him not to say anything, jumped the gun, tried to get out in front of the narrative, tried to get his side of the story out there. But he has to understand that this is a court process, and the court process will not be intimidated by media statements or social media posts.
Yeah, he has definitely created more of a mess, if you will. House Republicans are starting to try to discredit DA Braggs, going as far as requesting that he testify on Capitol Hill. Is this a part of the normal process, or are they being who they are, if you will?
I think this crosses the line, and I think that more people need to speak out against this. There are 3 co-equal branches in the United States. The judicial branch should be solely apart from the political fray and be allowed to run its process. To subpoena a district attorney to give testimony about an ongoing investigation with potential criminal charges could reach the level of obstruction. So I think that legislators need to be very careful when wading into the judicial process. And I think it's a bad decision to subpoena the lead prosecutor while there's an ongoing judicial matter that could lead to charges. If you cross the line, like some may have in Georgia, you may find yourself indicted as well.
Mr. Griggs, Georgia prosecutors are considering racketeering and conspiracy charges against Trump. I know you've been monitoring this case really closely as the president of the Georgia NAACP. Can you give us some insight on how this case has impacted Black voters, election workers, and District Attorney Fani Willis?
Yeah, I mean, this case impacted Georgia. You know, we had the greatest turnout in Georgia history with the 2020 election, and then there started the election denying and the trying to cast doubt on the millions upon millions of African Americans and others that voted in this election. So you've had people call into the state. You've had protests in the state. You have an attempt to overturn the election in the state. So it has impacted a lot of people in Georgia, but particularly African Americans, because of the robust turnout. And we are very interested in this case because it seems to be a separate and distinct criminal process for the president of the United States. I myself am a criminal defense attorney, been doing it for 20 years. I've never seen an individual be able to be signaled that a RICO indictment may be coming. I was a part of the Atlanta Public Schools cheating scandal trial, Georgia's longest trial, which was a RICO indictment. Those teachers got no advance notice. They were indicted. They had to turn themselves in and they had to go through the process. I would expect the same judicial system for all individuals and not this signaling that we may do this, we may do that. You know, Georgia has a robust criminal justice system. They have grand juries that are impaneled every single day in all 159 counties, especially in Fulton County. It could have gone through the regular process, a regular grand jury. He could have already been indicted and he could be facing arraignment and a trial. So I'm concerned about how this case is moving, and I think it's creating more problems than solutions that it's solving.
Yeah, talk a little bit about, over the years, I'd love to get your insight on how do you think or why do you think the tide has turned? There was a while when President Trump seemed to be untouchable. We've all been through that process. Why now? Why do you think that now he might have to pay the piper?
Well, I think the mistake that he made was calling into Georgia. Georgia's always been a law and order state. And so when you break the law in Georgia, which he allegedly has done, you can expect swift responses from Georgia. I think other places, it was less clear, some of the conduct that he had participated in. But I think in Georgia, with the phone call that the entire world heard, there were at least 2 Georgia codes that he violated with regard to conspiracy to commit election fraud and solicitation of election fraud. So I think that's the difference. And I think you have prosecutors in this state that take the law very seriously. Fonnie Willis is one of them. She's been a compadre, a comrade for a long time. She's very serious about prosecuting crimes in Fulton County. And so I think it's no different here. She's going to follow the law. She's going to follow the facts. And I think if she follows the law and the facts, you will see this former president indicted and a trial in Georgia where he will have all of his due process rights. He will have the opportunity to present his side of the case. And then 12 citizens from Fulton County will make a decision on whether he violated the law. But I think the tide turned when he called into Georgia.
Mr. Griggs, speaking of the tide turning, just, before we go, I just want to ask you, a lot's been written about, what happens, if he's indicted or if he's not indicted politically. Does an indictment help or hurt Republicans as we enter in the 2024 election cycle? Just from your vantage point, what do you say?
I'm not sure. I'm an attorney. I don't really deal with the political blowback on this, but I do know this. If he's indicted in Georgia, he needs to focus on Georgia and focus on a jury of 12 citizens and not his aspirations for being president again. Because the Georgia judicial system is very serious and it should be taken very seriously. Because if he's indicted, he will be facing a long amount of time in a Georgia prison. And you're not going to be able to tweet or Facebook or do anything else other than serve that time. So politically, maybe it benefits him if he's acquitted, but he needs to focus on being acquitted as opposed to running for president.
Our thanks to Mr. Griggs, the president of the Georgia State chapter of the NAACP, your official soulmate. And so please come back and update us on this case as more information comes out.
I will. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.